Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another episode of In Literacy and Numeracy News, brought to you by VRJ Education Consultants. My name is Dr. Veronica Reed Johnson. I'm the lead consultant here. We offer a range of services, including our seminars and workshops. So for today, we are going to be going through an article by Mr. Mark Malabver, who is the principal of Yallahs High School, and he's also a PhD candidate at the University of Technology in Jamaica. And he talks about TREND, which is a government educational program, and how TREND is big on hype, but little on substance. And this was published in the Jamaica Observer at the end of 2023, so in November 2023. So let us get into this article. This article talks about the launch in early November 2023 by the Ministry of Education and Youth. They launched the Transformation of Education for National Development campaign. So that's TREND, Transformation of Education for National Development. And it was launched at the Carl Hendrickson Auditorium at Jamaica College in Kingston. The launch came about as a result of the recommendations made in the Reform of Education in Jamaica 2021 report, which we have been calling the Patterson Report. It was led by the commission. It was done by the commission led by Professor Patterson, the Jamaica Education Transformation Commission. So while the objective of TREND is not immediately clear, so this is from Mr. Malabver, it appears to be an attempt to sensitize Jamaicans about the move to transform the Jamaican education system and is centered around 7 key pillars for transformation. He makes the note that the TREND campaign, the public relations for the TREND campaign, will cost us taxpayers more than $30 million. He talks about the absence of cabinet ministers at this launch event. So the Ministry of Education and Youth certainly needs to be commended for its efforts to finally get the conversation going about the need to transform our education system. It was therefore most unfortunate that the Minister of Education, Favour Williams, had to leave the launch prematurely to attend to more pressing matters. But even more unfortunate was the noted absence of key cabinet and government ministers, government officials, particularly the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, and the Finance Minister, Dr. Nigel Clark. Based on documents coming out of the Mona School of Business, the transformation of our education system will cost 280 billion Jamaican dollars over 20 years and some 166 billion Jamaican dollars in the first 7 years of the program. This means that the government will have to find at least an extra 23 billion Jamaican dollars annually. Let's bear in mind that these figures do not factor in inflation in the years to come. The sheer cost of this program means that it will be the single biggest project ever to be undertaken by any administration in the history of the country. Therefore, the Prime Minister, Finance Minister, and Minister of Education should have been present to face tough questions, such as, of the more than 300 recommendations, which ones will the government undertake and why? What are the considerations that are on the table to fund the program? Are there any other recommendations apart from those contained in the Patterson report that will be included in the transformation of the education program? I note with interest that Barbados is also undergoing an overhaul of its education system. It is no less a person than Prime Minister Mia Mottley herself who is leading the change. The Ministry of Education and Youth has now employed an organizational change officer to help drive TREND. Given the Ministry of Education and Youth's poor track record for successful and sustainable implementation of programs, this was certainly a step in the right direction. This is what Mr. Malabver is saying. as the leadership of the ministry has come to terms with the fact that it doesn't necessarily possess the requisite skill sets to bring the program to fruition. It will certainly need all the help it can get. It would be interesting to know what change model will be utilized, as this should form the roadmap for trend. John Cotter, for example, has advocated an 8-step process to achieve sustainable organizational change. The first four of these are increased urgency, building a guiding team, developing the vision, and communicating for buy-in. While there are other change models, they all essentially advocate the same steps. It's important to note that one cannot cut corners, circumvent, or merge any of these steps. I am therefore at a loss as to how a PR campaign has been developed for trend when key stakeholders such as teachers and principals have not yet been engaged to create a sense of urgency. So let me take a break from Mr. Malabver's comments for a moment to identify that this criticism has come up before. So this article is the end of November 2023. Since then, the government has gone ahead and said they're implementing several of the recommendations from the Patterson Commission. However, I've not seen a report as yet, and you can make your comments make your comments on the video about there being buy-in, there being consultation with parents, with teachers, with other stakeholders in terms of what is being done and how it is being done. So I've seen this criticism before. So let's get back to the article. The Patterson report requires a no-holds-barred conversation with teachers, principals, and teacher training institutions, region by region, even if it means closing the schools in each region for a day, then going into the universities and teacher training institutions for another round of conversations. During that process, you nurture your guiding teams on the ground, then you move on to the next step. By circumventing these processes, Mr. Malabver is saying, as happened with the launch of Trend, you run the risk of the program being stalled before it even began. PR by itself will not sustain the program. A key component of the discourse that must be had with teachers is the philosophy of education. One of the recommendations of the Patterson report is the need for Jamaica to determine and articulate a philosophy of education that will guide the system. The report went as far as stating that Jamaica has flirted with constructivism. The importance of the philosophy of education cannot be overemphasized. It guides the conceptualization, development, implementation, and assessment of a curriculum. Yet instead of pursuing a route of discourse and debate, the Ministry of Education and Youth came up with a so-called philosophy of education that does not fit into any of the known or established philosophies of education whatsoever. At best, it is a mission statement, but most certainly not a philosophy of education, says Mr. Malabver. One of the already implemented key recommendations of the Patterson report is the establishment of the Education Transformation Oversight Committee. This committee is currently chaired by Dr. Adrian Stokes. We have discussed this. An economist by profession, Dr. Stokes is certainly one of the brightest minds that this country has to offer. He's very astute and will call a spade a spade. His surgeon through the education system to where he's currently in his life has earned him the right to be interviewed on the TVJ program Profile. I do, however, hope that joint press conferences between ETOC and the ministry will not be a regular feature of ETOC's reporting arrangements, as this runs the risk of undermining its credibility in the public space and may just be seen as rubber stamping the utterances of the ministry. So let me take a break here from the article to again talk about a March 2024 article that we discussed, which is where we got the first update from ETOC. That update from the Education Transformation Oversight Committee was exactly what Mr. Malabver was talking about here, where there was in essence a joint presentation by ETOC and the ministry. And rather there being a distinction between the ETOC doing what it needs to do to implement these recommendations and then the ministry overseeing, it may give the impression that ETOC is just doing what the ministry in terms of a political arm wants to do. All right, so let's get into the final part of this article. ETOC should be reporting independently to the Ministry of Education in much the same way that the Economic Program Oversight Committee has been reporting on economic transformation programs. This is against the background that the Ministry of Education's credibility has taken a beating in recent times. The Patterson report highlighted the fact that one of the pathways to the transformation of the education system is improving prestige and properly incentivizing the teaching profession. The government missed a glorious opportunity to demonstrate its commitment to the transformation of education in this regard in the last compensation package, in keeping with the Ernst & Young report that had been commissioned and the 2021 Inter-American Development Bank report on the funding of education. The high level of teacher migration will inevitably undermine trend as the government's response to the migration issue is absent of a long-term strategy or solution. This is another issue that we will definitely take up in more detail in our live discussions. We have teachers that we've worked with, educators that we've worked with that have since migrated from Jamaica. So this is definitely an issue that we will be discussing on this channel. So getting back into the article, furthermore, we selectively reference the Finland education model without acknowledging that Finland pays its teachers a very competitive salary. The salary and treatment of our teachers have caused many of them to migrate to ply their trade in other countries. There is no democratic country that has a world-class education system that does not pay its teachers a salary that will attract the best and the brightest minds that the country has to offer. In fact, it is a prerequisite of the transformation of education. One of the 7 pillars of change for trend is early childhood, and the Patterson report recommended to overall the Early Childhood Commission. However, to my mind, the report did not go far enough in its recommendation. So here we're bringing in views from professionals within the industry. So Mr. Malabver is a principal, and where they are giving criticisms about what they might have done differently or recommended differently. Currently, only about 20% of early childhood centers are government-owned. The early childhood education sector is too important a sector to be left in the hands of private entities that are primarily driven by profit. I know of no other world-class education system that has a similar arrangement in their early childhood sector. The government needs to therefore take whatever steps are necessary to ensure they become the major players in the sector. If we fail to do this, then trend will not be realized. The Jamaica Teachers Association President Leighton Johnson is on record stating that the Patterson report did not adequately treat the issue of parents and the role they will be called upon to play in trend. This is no doubt a valid point, as this should have also been one of the key pillars of trend. Research has definitively confirmed that children with parents who are actively involved in their schooling tend to perform academically better. There needs to therefore be a clear-cut plan as to how we get parents involved in the lives of their children. And this may very well involve amendments to or enactment of legislation. So before we get to the final 2 paragraphs, I will definitely say this is something that VRJ Education Consultants is also on board with. It is parents that need to step in. There are many pillars of the education system and many different aspects to getting your child a good education. And one of those aspects that cannot be overlooked is the role that is played by parents. Parents who are actively involved in their children's schooling, these children tend to perform better. And we are focusing on academics, but we're talking about having well-rounded children. And it is parents that are involved in their children's lives overall that can help their children in these areas. So as we close out this article by Mr. Malabver, he says that if the Ministry of Education and Youth is serious about getting by, then they should take the necessary steps to engage with teachers and principals about trend in a systematic and meaningful way. They must also articulate and prioritize the recommendations they will accept and identify the ones they have rejected. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance need to also tell the country what proposals they are considering to ensure that trend is properly funded and sustained. We cannot afford to get it wrong. Therefore, we must not cut corners in this process. We have to move beyond the hype surrounding the PR and get to the substance of where the tire meets the road, or we run the risk of the Patterson report suffering the same fate as the Dr. Ray Davis report. So that is the end of this article. We're going to be talking about the report from the Davis report, and we're going to compare that to the Patterson report, and we're going to see the different things that have been contributed and what has been done since that report. So thank you very much for joining me and staying with me to the end of this discussion. Join me next time when we continue to talk about the education system in Jamaica, focusing primarily on literacy and numeracy.